Chapter 2 Encounter. Moldream and Feldream's journey back to the camp was a busy one over the next 2 days. Along the way, they had caught another 11 hares without Malurth's so-called assistance. With one spear between them, hunting had been a challenge, but the duo's newfound, simple diversion strategy worked well, at least some of the time. Their long hunt was now at its end, however. The sun was setting as they entered the guarded boundary, filled with the familiar sights and smells of campfires, a boisterous populace, and pitched tents stitched from various animal skins. "Mummy!" shouted Feldream's 2 children, running up to her for happy embraces. "My precious babies," she cried. It had been 5 days since they had last seen one another, and there was no guarantee of Feldream's return. "Thank you for the hunt, Moldream," she said, turning to smile at him. "It's no problem," he said, nodding and passing her their abundant catch. "Take it easy, I'm off for the night." "What, on your favorite perch?" said one of Feldream's children. "Don't be rude, Seraph." Feldream hushed, then said to her other child, "Nor you, Seraph." Moldream chuckled. "Yeah, on my favorite perch." "I knew it," said Seraph. "We'll see you there tomorrow with Larkham." Smirking, Moldream raised one eyebrow, nodded at Feldream, and left the family to it. "I'll save you some hair for the week," Feldream called to him, his back turned as he strode. "That'll be great, thanks," he replied, sticking his hand up in the air, thumb cocked. Casually making his way through the camp, Moldream stroked his light, itchy beard. He put the thought of shaving to the back of his mind as he passed a tent and spotted Malurth. "Hey, Ashhole," Malurth thundered, approaching the young man at speed, wielding a rusty pole in his hand. Spirith and Spiridream, friends of both men, were passing by. Seeing trouble brewing, they intervened and pushed Malurth back. "Good hunt?" Moldream sneered, calmly walking by and sticking his middle finger up. "Come here and say that," the elder shouted. His temper continued to rise, yet it was soon cooled into stony silence, when he saw how the 2 women observed Moldream with favorable looks. They had intervened before in a similar situation. It wasn't the first time Malurth had sabotaged a hunt. Moldream simply walked away, striding toward the broken temple atop the hill, at the base of which the camp cowered in its shadow. Delighting in the fuss he had caused, Moldream's grin spread into his cheeks as he made his way through the camp, nodding a self-satisfied greeting to those he passed. Eventually he strode into the temple and, as he entered, his cheeky grin faded. Casting his equipment down by the cracked marble banister of an open balcony, he let out another long sigh. "Thank the spirits that's over with," he murmured, feeling every muscle in his body ache from exhaustion. Leaning his back on the wall, the hard scabbard reminded him of his find. Moldream's cold hands met the hilt as he withdrew the sword. It was far icier than his own grip. Slowly pulling the blade out, he found himself again surprised. He had already forgotten how dark its alloy was. Running his fingers on its surface repeatedly, he could only shake his head in awe. The surface, like that of water, still seemed to him so far removed from any material composition he may have expected. It seemed to absorb any light that graced it, including the noon sunlight when he had found it. The hilt was thick, its edges sloped, but no marks, words or symbols told of its origin. Moldream slotted the heavy 2-hander back into the casing, pondering a while longer about its origin. He leaned on the balcony, mindlessly staring at the camp below, scratching his chin. By the weak light emanating from the fires below, he withdrew a cracked mirror from his pocket and a sharpened knife from his arm scabbard. Shave, sleep, he thought. Against his wishes it had returned, the explosions, the smoke, and the blood. "Get out of the way," roared the fading echo. A pale phantasm of a man Moldream believed he once knew. A sudden flash obscured his vision. The rumbling of an explosion forced him to his knees. It was a memory. A recurring, unshakable and persistent nightmare from which he knew he may never be freed. Bullets ricocheted about him. He crouched with his head between his knees and his hands behind his head. "Where's Neva?" he cried. He couldn't move. He felt frozen. All he could do was watch in horror through the gaps of his fingers, as the distant memories of the people he once knew screamed and died. Moldream forced himself awake and muttered under his breath, rising to his feet drearily, thanking the spirits it was just a memory. It was good to feel alive and be conscious. Sighing in relief, he gazed toward the descending moon and the ascending sun creeping over the horizon, while the stars littering the heavens were conquered gradually by the blood-red morning. Watching the dawn of a new day, he leaned on the marble banister on the open balcony, his perch, as the children said. He inhaled the air of the morning deeply and recalled an early memory, himself as a child, waking up in the old man's arms, in the war-torn city below, the smell of smoke, deafening screams, and blood staining his hands. The memory haunted him like an everlasting echo. It was on that night, long ago, that Larkham had saved him, though in truth, the memory was now a blur. Mildly, Moldream rubbed his sore eyes, exhaling deeply. He scraped back his long, dirty, knotted hair, tying it with a piece of string to keep it out of his face. The faint morning breeze caressed his cheekbones. He watched as his fellow tribals awakened gradually in the camp, chatting, cooking, and filling their empty stomachs with whatever meager nutrition was available. Some commotion below caught Moldream's attention. Larkham was gathering the children of the tribe for another one of his stories about the past, the blight of humanity. This oral tradition, handed down to Larkham by his own ancestors, served to inspire the tribe. If questioned, however, Larkham, by his own admittance, could not confirm the veracity of the lore of these tales. Nevertheless, he handed them down anyway. He hoped that someday the stories would be of use to those who followed him, even if they only served to entertain. The children scrabbled up the steps of the illuminated temple, creating a noisy ruckus. Larkham chuckled at their childish laughter. The old man had challenged them to a race to the top, a game he knew he would lose, as he hobbled behind them. "Almost story time, children," Larkham said, his tone joyous. The tribal leader's dirty white robes caught the sunlight as he stepped toward the balcony. A wide grin broke through his dark silver-streaked beard as he eyed his fosterson. Moldream stood still with his arms crossed. "Ah, I see Moldream wants to join us," Larkham said, a chuckle escaping his bushy mouth. "Don't count on it, old man," Moldream muttered. "You know what I think about your stories. I'm just up here appreciating the dawn of a new day." Larkham's smile disappeared for a brief moment. It wasn't normal for the old man to look so serious. His eyes narrowed on Moldream, as if he detected something different about him. Try as he might, however, the truth eluded him. "Oh, as always, my boy, as always," Larkham said, raising a cunning eyebrow, his grin returning. "But also, as always, it's an amazing coincidence that you appear up here when I'm speaking of old, silly stories. Right, son?" Moldream, turning away, groaned, "Just get on with it." Larkham's smile was unwavering, as he turned to face the amassing children. "Hush now, little terrors. I will tell you my stories of old, but if you don't settle down right now, I'll make this boring story go on forever." Moldream, with his back still turned, chuckled to himself at Larkham's daft threat. The children settled down, sitting cross-legged in a semicircle around the wise man. Larkham closed his eyes with a frown, and took in a deep breath. "Our world was once a paradise," he said, "over 150 years ago. But our ancestors, fueled by an insatiable lust for luxury, stripped our Mother Earth of all her natural wealth and beauty. Then one day, all across the globe, our world fought back. The oceans swamped the lands without pity, drowning us and many, many other creatures. Black clouds filled the empty skies, turning all to darkness, so not even the sun could cast its warming rays. Lightning and thunder erupted from the heavens, sowing fear and dread before our ancestors' eyes, for all that was to come. Horrendous, gigantic creatures, known to us now as behemoths, rose from the depths of the vast oceans and sank our ancestors' silver ships with no mercy. Neither man nor woman had ever seen such creatures belonging only to myth and legend. The waters allowed these gargantuan parasites safe passage into our cities closest to the shores. There they readily devoured our ancestors, who tried to hide inside their grey stone towers. However, they were not the only monstrosities to strike at us, for terrible serpents also invaded our lands. Bearing horns and metallic-like scales, they waged a bloody war upon us, with fang and claw, killing and feasting on the weak and the strong alike. No one knows where they came from or why, but even to this day, whether it be parasite or serpent, it is not safe to wander near the shores. Soon after the beasts arrived, mighty quakes erupted, engulfing our ancestors in flames and molten metal. Many of our mighty buildings plummeted to the ground, shaken from their strong foundations. An abrupt cough halted the old man. "That's a pleasant story, Larkham," Moldream said, turning to face the semicircle. "But if you carry on any longer, you'll age another 10 years before you finish." The old man faced his sarcastic son, eyes firmly locked with the young man's own. Larkham's weathered face was solemn, but his eyes glittered with amusement. Both men nodded, then winked slyly. "I would clip your ears, but you are mistaken," Larkham grumbled. "For once, you didn't disturb my storytelling until near the end." "Yeah, well," Moldream said, playing along. "I get bored with the same stories being repeated, which is, all the time." Whispers and snickers of delight circulated amongst the children. This kind of banter between the elders didn't happen often, but when it did, the children struggled to contain their pleasure. "Well, until you're old enough and far more mature than the children," Larkham said to Moldream, "you're not going to hear another story." Moldream pretended to be caught for words. "Oh no, please don't," he said, almost bursting into laughter but holding firm, looking at the kids, his expression one of shock and dismay. "I don't know how I'll cope." Moldream always enjoyed getting a rise out of the old man, interrupting his stories by coughing. This, however, was a more convincing display of exaggerated antics that neither could pass up the opportunity to perform. "Now, children," Larkham said, "please leave me and my son alone for the moment. Go outside and play, go on now." Once Larkham's little terrors had scrabbled back down the temple steps, Moldream spoke freely. "Speaking seriously for a minute, you do know your stories are nothing but stories, right, old man? The only dangers around this place are murderers, rapists, and beggars." "Well, you had to go and spoil it, didn't you?" Larkham grumbled. "But I'm glad, at least, you've gained the manners not to say such things in front of the children, Moldream. These innocent youngsters don't need to live in fear of the world that we adults know and fear ourselves. They only need to be taught caution." Moldream sighed, turning his back to Larkham once again. This was no new conversation between them, and Moldream was still tired from the hunt. "Oh, by the way, son," Larkham said, raising a pointed finger to the air as he switched topic, "I've been meaning to catch up with you. I want to know where you went the other day with Feldream, and how you achieved such a large catch. I have a feeling you're not telling me everything." "None of your business," Moldream groaned. He'd get a lecture if the old man knew where they had been to hunt for the past week. After all, Feldream's children had just been present with the other tribal kids, listening to Larkham describe the danger of the shores. "We just hit the city outskirts on our way back," Moldream said. "That's all." "Well, I've heard from here and there that you've brought something interesting into the camp," Larkham probed. "I'm just curious as to what it could be." Moldream paused for a moment, frowning. He had kept the sword hidden from Feldream, and Malurth was nowhere to be seen after their scuffle. "No, he's trying to call my bluff, that clever old bastard." Moldream's coat was so thick, how could Larkham have known what was strapped to his back beneath it? "Look, it's just an ordinary weapon, nothing drastic," Moldream muttered, turning to stare his foster father directly in the eyes again. "We use weapons all the time to hunt." "Of course we need weapons to hunt," Larkham replied, his tone civil. "But you know very well the difference between a spear and something that could explode." "These weapons of mass destruction only exist in your old tales, old man," Moldream blurted, severing the conversation for a moment. "If you must know, all I found was a rusted pistol, and we didn't even venture that far near the dead fields." "Please don't return to that place, Moldream," Larkham growled. It's dangerous. I've warned you about it before. Look, I went to that forsaken place and saw nothing but rusted metal and bones littering the landscape, Moldream said, his tone aggravated. I've no idea why you fear that barren wasteland more than the city. It's safer there, in my opinion. Moldream, it's your own skin at the end of the day, if you choose to trade such things in the city. But do not ever take someone there if they have children, bloody hell, Larkham said, frowning then huffing. Just remember who found you and nursed you back to health. Oh no, no you don't. Not this again, Moldream growled. Enough of the guilt trip crap before you really piss me off. Larkham chortled, almost as if he had won the conversation. Just you remember that, son, if you don't have anything else to. Before Larkham could finish, Moldream brushed past him, eyes downcast at the marble tiles. I don't care, Moldream said, snarling over his shoulder, adjusting his weapon beneath his long coat. I'm off to find something else that isn't the slightest bit useful or interesting. Larkham observed him striding down the steps, and then raised his voice, which almost echoed down the passage. It's a sword, isn't it? Moldream nearly hesitated, but thought better of it. The tribal leader sighed, continuing to watch the young man leave the dilapidated temple. Shaking his head, Larkham returned his gaze to the rising sun. Something's different with him, Larkham thought, but I just can't fathom what it is. The spirits are quiet too. Moldream travelled from the camp, regarding the tribal families getting on with their daily business. Iliv's not worth living most of the time, he mused. Truth be told, Moldream was fed up. This was all he knew, trying to survive in a land filled with woes and fearful stories. Hey Moldream! Feldream called out to him from her tent. Her children were busily playing with stick spears, pretending to hunt. Off already, I see. That's not like you. Just fancied a walk this morning, Moldream said, not slowing his momentum and trying his best to feign a smile. Can't talk, I'll see you later. Oh, all right, she said, waving a prepared meat bundle at him. You can collect it later, whenever you're ready. Thanks, will do, he said. Oh, wait. Before I forget, she added, pursuing him up to the edge of the camp. Spiral went off into the city this morning. Could you keep an eye out for her? Moldream stopped in his step and frowned, turning to stare at Feldream. Why the hell would she go alone again? She knows it's dangerous down there. I told her not to. That sister of mine is more trouble than she's worth, Feldream said, releasing an exasperated sigh. Anyway, pretty please. No problem, I'll keep an eye out, Moldream said. Thank you, see you later then, Feldream replied with a smile. Later, he said, finally making his way out of the camp, down the slope of the hill toward the inner suburbs of the city. The sun was gradually rising above the ruined skyscrapers to cast full morning rays. Moldream quickened his pace through the streets, near empty, save for the scant beggar or traveler scrounging a living. Some would end up dead, others fighting for an existence, while many just avoided it altogether, if they could. Gangs, known as packs, ruled the city. If you were in their territory, it could cost you your life or valuables. Suddenly, a woman's cry echoed down the street. Moldream halted and listened intently but could hear nothing else. Moments passed as he glanced down several streets. He wondered if he was hearing things. It wasn't uncommon for a scream to be quickly muffled. The tribal shook his head, staring at the dirt beneath his boots. He gasped and remembered. Shit, Spiral. Moldream heard another scream, and the ground tremored briefly. He looked to the east, toward a ruined library overgrown with vines. A section of one wall suddenly crumbled into an adjacent river with fierce thuds. Moldream sprinted toward the rumbling building as mortar dust plumed from it. He heard the woman's repeated, muffled shrieks, and he saw some of the local beggars running from the scene. What's wrong? Moldream shouted. The strangers, ignoring his question, didn't look back as if their lives were in peril. Always the bloody same. He barked at them. He disregarded the strangers, and felt obligated to check if the scream was Feldream's sister. Rushing to the half-collapsed building, he stopped at the blocked entrance. Then he began to climb the crumbling walls to achieve some height. Buildings collapsing in the city were a common occurrence. The decaying structures spanned many generations, standing testament to scenes of extreme fighting involving small arms or explosives. The screams suddenly stopped. A chill raced down Moldream's spine. His eyes widened as he secured his footing to stay quiet. At first he thought the sound could have been warring gangs, but it was too quiet, and besides, it was daytime. Looking to his right, Moldream noticed a small window. He squeezed himself through it carefully. The screaming resumed. He had entered onto the first floor. The entire interior of the library was covered in pungent vegetation, smothering every vertical surface that survived the collapse. Slowly, Moldream peeked above the balcony's ivy-covered marble banister and gawked at an abysmal creature he had never seen before. Darkened, multicolored scales matched vicious fangs. Horns, a meter in length, ran up its forehead and down its spine. In place of fingernails, the monstrous alien had claws. It was tall, around 8 feet by Moldream's best guess. The creature was trying to reach the screaming woman, hidden somewhere beneath the fresh rubble and dust. Further surveying the area below, Moldream saw 6 disemboweled human corpses. They wore unfamiliar, exotic clothing and armor, travelers or rich traders perhaps, he wondered. Regardless of their origins, the creature had made short work of them. Their bloody entrails smeared the filthy floor tiles. Moldream's vision rolled back to the beast as, with brute strength, it moved the huge stones. Then the creature paused with a groan, almost as if it had detected something. Moldream trembled in the brief silence. Once again, the woman screamed in terror. The reptilian beast returned its attention to the last pile of rubble that stood between it and its prey. Then an echoing voice invaded Moldream's mind. Lazarish Zandrish. Wide-eyed, he realized it came from the bipedal beast, yet it had not opened its snout. It had almost reached the stranger through the rubble. Its thick horns erected, in uncontained excitement at the thought of devouring its prey. Spiral. Moldream's instincts took over, his adrenaline in full flow. Bolting down the nearby stairs, he jumped halfway down the steps. Landing awkwardly, he reached for the hilt of the blade, clasped it firmly, and withdrew the large, cumbersome weapon from its metallic scabbard with a loud, unusual chime. Slowly, the Goliath turned to face him, glaring with its large, abyssal oval eyes. Whipping its large tail, it struck the ground with a heavy smack, sending dust pluming outward, caught in the sunrays piercing through the broken ceiling. Moldream felt a tightening in his chest, a stiffening sensation in his arms and legs, symptoms of pure, absolute terror. He tried calling out to reassure Spiral, but his words came out weak. "I got you," he croaked. The beast roared and launched itself at the would-be warrior. Moldream locked eyes with it, the cold malice from the reptile penetrating his mind. Suddenly, the tribal was lost in its hypnotic psychic glare, and, before he knew it, the monstrous creature was already upon him. With a clenched fist and a mighty uppercut, it struck him directly in the chest, sending him flying a great distance through the air. Moldream landed harshly in a nearby pool of water with a loud thud. Coughing, he spat blood from his mouth, his face twisting in agony. Tightening his grip on the sword and clutching his chest with his spare hand, he was overcome by sharp, shooting, debilitating pains. The alien menace roared triumphantly, lifting its head high. Its powerful vocals shook the building's foundations. Gathering some kind of fevered rage, its eyes began to glow an unearthly crimson. Moldream scraped his sword across the shallow water, struggling to stand upright. Breathing heavily and wincing from the trauma, the tribal strengthened his resolve. He went to charge with the blade outstretched, and wanted to swing it upward in an arc, but he took just one step forward and stopped. He could barely breathe. Lurching forward, Moldream coughed and spewed blood. That one punch had decimated his ribcage and organs. He was dying where he stood, shaking all over from the sudden shock. The monstrous reptile charged at him once more, and struck him with another sharp blow to the chest. Moldream, wide-eyed, was lifted into the air by the sheer force of the punch. He was sent flying through a nearby marble banister with an audible, sickly crunch. His skeleton fractured in numerous places, on contact with the old stones. As he came to rest amidst the grey, swirling dust on the stairs, the bloodied tribal knew he was as good as dead. He was losing consciousness from the pain surging through his broken anatomy. His pupils dilated, and the world beaming into his retinas turned many shades darker. "I'm sorry, Veldream." Spiral. Several tears rolled down his dusty cheeks. Closing his eyes, he took one last agonizing breath. But then, just as Moldream's consciousness began to fade, his ears twitched to an unusual, soothing voice. "Elinshana!" Suddenly, a wave of warm, gentle light washed over him. The agony surging through his body faded. His eyes fluttered and flickered open. Miraculously, his fractures and internal injuries had healed in an instant. With no time to spare, Moldream jumped to his feet and, with renewed vigor, leapt over the remaining banister to get away from the momentous mountain of muscle. The reptile narrowly missed Moldream with a swipe of its talons as the tribal jumped. The beast, unable to stop its own momentum, crashed into the marble-tiled wall with an earth-quaking whack. Moldream, landing on his feet, saw it was not Spiral. To his surprise and relief, it was a young woman, possibly around his own age, dressed in dusty royal blue robes with a matching cape and hood, with her long red hair flowing from it. Held in the stranger's hands was a wooden staff, pointed directly at him. "What the hell are you doing?" Moldream shouted, trying to catch his breath, the words barely escaping his throat. "Get out of here." The red-haired stranger's tired, pale expression suddenly twitched to one of horror, her mouth wide open. Moldream spun on his heels, narrowly dodging a blow to his face, sensing the rushing air of the swipe. In that moment, he became aware his sword had changed, emitting a faint silvery glow. With no time to check it in finer detail, however, he focused on the fight. Something was different. His reactions felt quickened. The creature's next swing appeared slower than normal, as if time itself had bent marginally in Moldream's favor. The tribal rolled to dodge the second attack, swinging his blade in a counterstrike across the creature's thigh and kneecap with a crack. Raging, the beast lurched and again landed a blow on Moldream with great force, sending him sprawling across the cracked slabs for many yards. With his sword smashing, scraping, and sparking against the dusty ground tiles, Moldream bounced and rolled. Once he had halted, he coughed hard and caught his breath. The punch had almost smashed his ribcage for a third time. "Elinshana Dukela Shwen," sang that sweet melody, a warm light washing over him once more. The mystical hymn was coming from the young woman. Agonizing pain from the punch again disappeared. This time, however, Moldream noticed the sword was clearly reacting to the young woman's voice. Silver light shimmered on the blade's black, broad surface, rolling across its alloy like waves on a shore. The monstrous reptile glared at the duo, barely able to stand on its legs as blood pumped from its crippling leg wound. Moldream wasted no time and jumped to his feet. Panting heavily, he arched his weapon below the waist, and with all the strength he had left, he sprinted forward. The stranger's mantra built on his momentum, and in turn, increased the weapon's sleeping power. "Elena Kanshana Doom!" Moldream roared and swung his two-hander in an upward arc, thrusting it into the abdomen of the bipedal reptile. The blade whined with a supernaturally high pitch for that one deciding moment. A thunderous explosion signaled the final blow. A blinding flash spilled from the dilapidated library. Moments later, Moldream, halting on his knees, stared blankly at the dark sword clenched in his sweaty palms. The hilt remained cool, yet the blade hissed at the surrounding air. Its energy seemed spent, the mystical light fading. The monster was toppled, split in two. Slumping on his rear, Moldream caught his breath, closing his eyes as the last of the adrenaline pumped its way through his veins. He took a moment to gather his senses. Sighing with relief, he stared at the large, bulbous, horned head of the beast, noticing its eyes staring straight into his. Approaching it, He raised his sword with both hands, and swinging it harshly several times, hacked the reptile's skull from its neck, just to be sure. He refused to look at its lifeless dark gaze as he lifted the heavy head by one of its horns. "Hey," Moldream said, approaching the red-haired stranger. "Are you all right?" Kneeling, she looked up and, with her hands quivering in shock, pulled her hood back to reveal her dusty, ashen expression, with tears leaving trails in their wake. In that moment, the sun shone directly through the hole in the roof and revealed her beautiful green, glistening eyes. She stammered, caught for words as she looked around her at the devastation. "Oh no," she said, bursting into a lengthy cry. Moldream, not knowing what to say, looked around at the disemboweled men in far more detail than he would have liked to have seen or remembered. He knelt next to the young woman and sheathed his sword in its metallic scabbard, chucking the beast's head to the floor. "I'm sorry for your friends," he said. "Come here, I got you." He reached out with both hands to clutch the stranger and bring her in to hug her tightly. She didn't resist. Unable to release words, she babbled through the mental trauma, wailing in his ear. After 10 minutes of holding and rocking her back and forth, Moldream said, "Are you all alone?" I'm terrified," she answered eventually with a weak nod. Her accent was pristine and enunciated, clearly not local. "I don't know what I'll do." "It's still dangerous here," he said, gently releasing his hug and reaching for her hand to hold hers. "Come back with me to my tribe for now," he said. "You'll be safe, and you can get some rest. You look exhausted." Staring directly into his blue eyes, her face furled and her lips quivered. "I can't leave my friends." Moldream glanced again with sadness toward her comrades scattered about the library in mangled heaps. He knew he could have been another one of them if it wasn't for her miraculous power. He privately counted his blessings, but for now he needed to get her away from here. "Don't worry," he said, turning to stare her directly in the eyes again. "I'll come back for them, with help. I promise." He stood slowly, without letting go of her hand in reassurance. Then he gently raised her upright alongside him. She was just a couple of inches shy of Moldream's height when standing. "You mean it?" she sobbed. I just don't know what to do. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," Moldream said, smiling warmly at her. "Follow me and don't look back," he added, leading her away from the slaughter.